Fucking hell. It's taking the mic to go live. I don't know what's up with it. Good morning and welcome to the Morning Bulletin here on the Blood Red channel. I'm your host, Edward Kay, and I'm joined today by David Lynch, where we're going to be discussing what was a fairly comfortable win at Anfield for Liverpool last night in the Champions League group stages against Rangers. It was the first meeting between the two sides competitively, but if we're being honest, Rangers didn't really turn up for the competition. Lynch, I'm going to come straight to you. What did you think overall of Liverpool's performance and of that of Rangers last night?
Yeah, I thought it's right to say it was a very one-sided game. I think there's a different level there. It's a massive step up for Rangers coming into the Champions League this season. I think they sort of they found that against Ajax and Napoli so far, and again Liverpool was another step for them, and they couldn't quite reach that level. I think, considering that they've been hammered in a couple of these games, they're probably the 2-0 doesn't look too bad, but I also don't think that really was a fair reflection of the nature of the game. I thought Liverpool had so many chances; it could have been a lot more. And for Liverpool, that's sort of important to take forward because they needed a confidence boost after another disappointing result in the Premier League. So even though the opposition is not of the level, to make this a hugely significant result, I still think to get a win on the board and keep the Champions League campaign on track was important for them.
Yeah, it was a hugely important win, like you say, keeping that Champions League campaign on track, especially with obviously Napoli absolutely battering Ajax in the other game in the group. But we're going to come on to obviously Trent Alexander-Arnold with a beautiful free kick. Just how much do you think that's going to do him good in terms of his confidence? Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about him defensively recently. It was a pretty decent display from him defensively last night, although wasn't really tested too much. But yeah, what do you think that free kick's going to do for his confidence?
Yeah, but it's an interesting one because I think as you rightly point out, I think so much of the scrutiny that's been on him over the international break and in recent weeks really has been about the defensive side of his game. So I suppose even though a goal is good for him, you would argue that he doesn't really prove the doubters wrong. No one really doubts his abilities going forward. I think the whole question marks over him is whether he can do the right things going the other way, and that's the area of his game that we saw was analysed by Gary Neville recently, and where the questions really are around him in terms of his England place. So you do just hope, though, despite that getting a goal will be good for confidence. You saw in his celebrations a lot of passion in that. Sort of looked like a player who some of the talk around him is getting to him, and I think, although the defensive question mark has always been there, I think it's been a lot worse recently, and I think that's because of this debate around him. I think some of it's getting in his head a little bit. So if the goal can take away from that and give him that confidence boost and give him a little bit more belief in his play on the other side of the ball, then that will be really good for him. And I think he wasn't troubled at all defensively last night, which is that is helpful, even though the level of opposition is not quite the same. So yeah, if he can just take that forward, that'll be really good for him. But I do. There's a lot more to come. There's a lot more for him to show, and I think we'll see really his defensive side of his game tested a lot more at Arsenal at the weekend. So hopefully he can use that goal in some way, and he's got to go forward and now just prove that he can do the defensive things that people say he hasn't got in his game.
Yeah, obviously really important for him getting that goal. Be great for his confidence, and Bruce agreeing there. I think we held a solid defensive line, and Trent didn't just bomb forward, picked his moments well last night, which I definitely agree with. Coming to another comment, though, which brings me on to something I wanted to speak about. Never realised how good Jota is in that number 10 role. Obviously, it was a new setup for Liverpool last night, and I wanted to sort of get your initial thoughts on what you saw from Liverpool in that formation and any standout performers within that system.
Yeah, well, we spoke to Virgil van Dijk in the mix zone after the game, and he was sort of asked about how he felt that change of formation affected things, and the first word he said was he felt it made Liverpool a lot more solid, and I would agree with that. Again, you've got that caveat there of it being Rangers and not maybe a top level team, so it is worth noting that, and that'll be the question mark that Jurgen Klopp's got to answer, is whether he can take this formation forward into tougher games, particularly this weekend. That is a big debate he's got to have with his coaching staff, I suppose. But it did seem to work. I think, Liverpool's problem had been, a lack of solidity, being run through by teams at times. And you wouldn't have naturally thought that adding another attacker into the mix would have fixed things in that regard, but it actually did seem to. It seemed to make the press a bit more coherent, seemed to make it harder for Rangers to pass out and pass through. And that's given Jurgen Klopp a lot to think about. I think, talking about Jota in that number 10 role, I think, at times it was almost rather than a 4-2-3-1 with Jota in the 10, he was almost pushed up alongside Nunes in a sort of 4-2-4 at times, and that's the exciting element of it, is that you have that flexibility. You can drop into those positions, but you can also push on and give you real numbers when you're on the break. So, I thought he was impressive in there. I think, further to the big decisions in terms of whether to stick with that formation is whether you stick with the same personnel. Now, would Roberto Firmino be better in that sort of, if it is a 4-2-3-1, you need to solidly play that formation? Is he better in that 10 position than Jota maybe would be? Is Jota maybe better being the pushed up number 9 and maybe you leave Nunes out? Does Fabinho come in as one of the two holding midfielders? A lot of tough decisions to make, and you'd have liked to have Jurgen Klopp to have come away with a few more answers from using that formation, but as I say, because it was Rangers, you maybe didn't learn as much about it as you might hope. Huge decisions to make for the weekend regarding whether he sticks with that going forward, and if he does, who the personnel are there. So it's some difficult decisions. I'm glad I don't have to make them.
Yeah, I think it's certainly interesting to see whether he will stick with that system for Arsenal. My head tells me he might go back to something more tried and tested, but it was interesting to see it last night, and it'll be interesting to see that system against, like you say, maybe slightly better opposition. No disrespect to Rangers, obviously. But I'm going to come on to Mohamed Salah now, another player who got a goal last night, a much needed one. Obviously, it wasn't from open play; it was a penalty. There were a few shouts in the cop of let Nunes take it, but I don't think that was ever going to happen, was it? But yeah, another player who hopefully the goal will give him a bit of confidence, and hopefully he can kick on, because obviously it's not been quite the electric start to the season we're used to seeing from Mohamed Salah where the goals are concerned. So what do you think that'll do for his confidence?
Yeah, I think it's he's always good for a goal, and I think he will be happy to have got on the score sheet last night. And as you say, there's absolutely no chance he was giving that penalty up. He loves to score goals, and he won't be given a free opportunity like that. But I think one thing you would say is that this switch of formation, although I think it did really help Liverpool in an attacking sense, is that I'm not quite sure that it got Salah in goal scoring positions more. I think that's been a bit of the theme of the season, is that the way they've changed things is that Salah just doesn't seem to be inside quite as much. He's more of a creative player in wide positions, and I still, with 4 attackers in, that problem sort of persisted. He needed to stay wide to sort of create space for others. That obviously worked, because you saw how many chances did Nunes get last night. I think that's part of the reason behind this whole redesign of the attack, is that rather than having Firmino, who is dropping deep and creating space for the wingers to come inside, you've got an out-and-out number 9 who is going to be the guy who gets the chances and hopefully score them. He's more of a focal point. Whether that trade-off is worth it will depend on whether Nunes starts picking up goals, because as many chances he had last night, he didn't score. And I think it's encouraging he's getting there, but he does need to start bagging some of these opportunities. And obviously, you are taking away from the amount of goals that Mohamed Salah will score. We'll see in the long term whether that is the payoff is worth it in that. But yeah, you can clearly see that it's taken away from the chances that Salah still gets, and I think that's going to be something we'll see going forward. And as I say, we'll see if it's worth it. Last night he still gets on the score sheet through a penalty, but I think he would like to be in those goal scoring positions a little more frequently. And if that's something he can get while Nunes is still up top, then that would be great. But at the moment, it just doesn't quite look like it.
Yeah, a word on Darwin Nunes then, because you mentioned there he had a fair few chances. I can remember 3 or 4 pretty good chances for him off the top of my head. He never failed to test the keeper. He was hitting the target, but how important is it that he gets that next goal? Because obviously he's not scored since the opening day of the season. I don't think he's not really been starting many games. So how important do you think it is for him to start getting amongst the goals and really solidify his place in that Liverpool team up top?
Yeah, it was interesting. Jurgen Klopp spoke about it, didn't he, before the match? It's clearly sort of slightly getting in Darwin's head that he's not getting these goals, and he really wants to prove himself, and maybe trying a little bit too hard last night. But I think you've got to be hugely encouraged by the fact he gets chances. He every time he's been on the pitch now for Liverpool, he's got shots away. And that's something you want to see. I think I'd be a lot more worried if he wasn't getting opportunities and he was almost anonymous on the pitch. You can see where the goals are going to come from. He just needs to get those little finishes of, right. He's hitting the keeper now because he's just trying to get it on target. Whereas, with a little bit more confidence, or one just goes in or a keeper gets a hand to it, but it goes in the back of the net. That'll do a lot for him. And I think it sort of reminds me of, you saw Erling Haaland against Liverpool in the Community Shield earlier this season, and he could have had a hat trick really with the amount of chances he got, and he came away from that game and people were saying, "Oh, is it going to work out for him?" But it was so obvious from the chances he got that he was going to score goals and score a lot of them. And I think you look at Nunes now and the amount of shots he's getting away. If that continues, and I feel it will continue because it's been a real theme of his Liverpool career so far, then I think the goals won't be far behind. And I think you only have to look to his compatriot Luis Suarez, who had a very similar start at Anfield as well, actually, in terms of he just seems to get loads of chances but couldn't put them away. I think once Nunes gets one, he'll get on a roll, and that's hugely encouraging for Liverpool.
Yeah, it does seem like a matter of time before the goals start to come. But that is all we've got time for on the Morning Bulletin this morning. Lynchy, thanks for joining me. I've been your host, Edward Kay, and from me and David Lynch, it's goodbye for now.